Hi bookflowers, it's Kristen from Perks of a Bookflower, and today I am so excited to tell you that I finished the Owl's Magical Readathon. Whew, and what a trip it was. If you didn't see my Owl's Magical Readathon TBR, I'll go ahead and link it up here so you can check it out. But basically, I'm here today to just kind of bring you a wrap up on all my thoughts of the different books that I had to read. My career that I chose was one similar to my real life career, in which I chose care of magical children. So, for this career, I had to read 8 different books to fulfill 8 different prompts. I've got thoughts, and I'm ready to share them with you. For Care of Magical Children, the first book I had to read was the arithmancy prompt, which was to read a book outside your favorite genre. For me, that would be fantasy. I don't read a lot of it, so I chose a middle grade fantasy called The Girl Who Drank the Moon, and I buddy read this with my dear friend Leanne, who is incredible. I gave this book 4 stars. For a fantasy, it was everything I could possibly imagine. It was uniquely written, it had charming characters, and overall was a really engrossing story. It follows the story of a girl named Luna, who is born into a broken, sad kind of town. Because of how this town is run, basically Luna is given up on her first birthday and taken into the woods to basically be rid of forever, but a nice witch saves her. And all seems to be going well until Luna accidentally drinks too much of the moon and becomes magical. It's a story of friendship and love and loss, and really the power of hope in sad times. And overall, I gave it 4 stars because of how uniquely it was written and because of how charming the characters were. The next book that I had to read was for my Charms OWL. For that, it was read a book with white on the cover. If you remember, I had originally chosen Wildwood, but I changed my mind because Scribd had Days of Distraction, which is a literary fiction novel that I've been wanting to read, and it had white on the cover. Days of Distraction is a literary fiction novel by Alexander Trang that sits at about 320 pages, and I ended up giving it an overall 3-star ranking, which for me is a good, solid read. I adore literary fiction and am a fan of the slow burn, but I'm not a fan of the slow burn when it's a bit rambly and I feel like it's not going anywhere. Days of Distraction is a quiet, introspective story about a 24-year-old who leaves her job as a tech writer to follow her boyfriend to New York, and she kind of comes of age and struggles with all of those typical struggles that a graduate student has, and I really related to a lot of the main character struggles, but at the heart of the story, it's more than just a coming of age and a slice of life story. I would say really the story is about what it is like to be a Chinese American woman and about what it's like to be a woman in her 20s, making difficult decisions, feeling kind of aimless and purposeless at times, trying to figure out who the heck you actually are. I loved those parts of the story. I found it so intriguing to learn more about the Chinese American struggle and can so much relate to what it is to feel 20 and aimless because same. But overall, the story rambled too much. And I think that in literary fiction, you have to kind of like walk the line between telling this beautifully written, slow burn masterpiece and still having an overall something that you're working towards. And for me, I didn't see that in this story. I just kind of saw a slice of life follow this girl as she kind of goes through her life decisions, but then never really comes to a solution to her problems. So because of that, I only gave this book 3 stars, but 3 stars is still solid, and I would definitely recommend this to people my age or people who like literary fiction in general. The next book I had to read was for my Defense Against the Dark OWL. For this, I had to read a book set at the ocean or the coast, and I decided to change my original TBR pick and read The Odyssey. And for The Odyssey, I gave it 4.25 stars. This is a gorgeous classic that follows the story of Odysseus as he struggles through many trials to return back to his home. Some of the reasons I loved it so much was because I was just rooting for Odysseus the whole time to make it home. I felt like very attached to him, I guess because he's such a clear hero, and I was just rooting for him. I also really enjoyed how this narrative was framed. I didn't realize that at the beginning it would follow Odysseus' son, Telemachus, but so we got lots of different ways the story was told to us. First, it starts off as Odysseus' son, Telemachus, and then we have direct experiences with Odysseus, and then a lot of the story is Odysseus describing things that has happened to him at a dinner. So I thought that that kind of spiced up the narrative and just made it a bit more interesting. I also just love the tone of this classic. I think it's so befitting of a classic. It just felt almost biblical and refined. But overall, why I love this classic so much is because I really enjoyed learning more about the ancient Greek culture. For example, I was so fascinated by the level of hospitality that you saw in this book. Every time Odysseus would go somewhere, he would be given so many gifts, and the level of hospitality was just amazing. And then also, I loved the portrayal of the gods and their influence on the Greek life. I really loved Athene in this story, and how she had such clear favorites, Odysseus being one of them, but how like the role of the gods influenced everyday life so much. It was like they truly believed that the events that happened in their life were the direct result of the gods, and for me that was just incredibly interesting. I had some annoyances. This book said rosy-fingered dawn so much that I did at times want to yeet it into the Aegean Sea, but for the most part I was able to look past that. Also, the son Telemachus kind of treats his mom Penelope pretty awfully, so wasn't a big fan of that, but overall this book is gorgeous and it's a classic for a reason, and I would highly recommend it to anyone, especially if you're trying to get into mythology. It was dense at first, but I soon got used to the writing style and was flying through the pages. The next book I had to read was for the herbology prompt, and that was read a book that starts with the letter M. So I read Matilda and gave it 4 stars. It was so wonderful to go back to Matilda, to see how much she loves reading, to go back and read some Roald Dahl. I really loved all of that. So basically, if you don't know, Matilda is a story of a girl who lives in a kind of unfriendly household but finds solace in books, and even more solace whenever she meets a lovely teacher named Miss Honey, who she kind of bands up with to cause mischievous chaos and uprule the evil that is both her family and the treacherous Miss Trunchbull. It was so fun reading the story and kind of remembering how mischievous Matilda was. She's not just like a quiet, bookish girl. She is going to go after her enemies using her talents, and that was fun to read. I also just love Roald Dahl's narrative voice. It brought new life to this book. The only reason I took off a star had to do with the ending, which I thought wrapped things up too quickly and too tidily. And it wasn't very realistic, I suppose, although not a lot of this is. But I feel like the ending could have been less rushed. But overall, this is probably my most favorite Roald Dahl book I have read because of both Matilda and Miss Honey, and it definitely earned its 4 stars. The next book I had to read was for the History of Magic OWL. For this one, it was to read a book that had to do with witches, and I chose The Witches by Roald Dahl. Now, I had an in-depth discussion about this book with my friend Phoenix, so it's linked up here, but basically, I gave this book 3 stars, which is a solid read for me. I really liked it. It was different from Matilda in the fact that it was a little bit more silly. I felt like it had a little bit less substance to it. But I think that if you are a child, you would find this very entertaining. Again, one of the things I loved about this book is how unique Roald Dahl's writing style is. The narrative voice is so strong. You feel like a friend is really just kind of telling you a story in a very funny way. It'd be like sitting down with Ron Weasley and having him tell you a story, basically. That's what I think of when I read Roald Dahl. I can see why people might, especially children, might find this book really scary. The illustrations in it can be kind of terrifying. So some of the reasons I took off 2 stars, one of those was because I thought that the ending was less than ideal. It's kind of like a trend in these books that I've read recently, but I felt like it was almost setting up a whole new story instead of just wrapping up the story that we already had. And then personally, I found the little kind of extra silly elements, such as all the witches yelling poo and dogs droppings and just all of these other things a little bit too much for me, but I think that someone younger really may have resonated with it more. The next book I read was for Muggle Studies. Sorry, I'm freaking out here because I loved this one. It was Muggle Studies, which was Read a Contemporary, and I read my 1 5-star read for the Owls, which was Geekerella by Ashley Poston. Guys, where do I even begin? This story had everything in it that I love in a contemporary. It was both light and sweet while also having a really deep, rich meaning, and it hit me hard in places. Geekerella is a contemporary retelling of the Cinderella story that follows a girl named Elle. Elle is obsessed with a fandom that's kind of similar to Star Trek. Her dream is to go to a convention that's based off this fandom and to enter a cosplay competition in the hopes of getting some money and escaping her wicked stepmother, but of course, none of it goes according to plan. Some of the reasons why I loved this book is because there's a vegan feed truck called The Magic Pumpkin. It's a story all about going after your dreams. I loved all the geekiness of this. As a major Harry Potter fandom person, I related to the love that Elle had for her own fandom because Harry Potter. And mostly I just loved Elle. She's our underdog. She's trying so hard to go after what she wants, especially because Elle is like a very fearful, timid person. So I loved watching her grow and eventually go after what she wanted. The only con, it kind of goes off of Elle again. I sometimes got frustrated at her for letting herself be taken advantage of so much, but it's really just part of her personality and she overcomes it. So I didn't let that take a star away. Geekerella was just the perfect read for me, and if you're looking for a fun contemporary with a lot of substance as well, I definitely recommend Geekerella for you. The next book I had to read was for the Potions OWL. This was to read a book under 150 pages, so I chose The Little Prince. It's quite a small child, and all I have to say is tend your baobabs. The Little Prince is a story about a child who lives on a planet and has this flower. He grows frustrated with the flower and ends up leaving it to go off and explore the world, and while there he learns a few lessons, one of them most of all being to cherish the flower that he has. This story is beautiful. It's very allegorical in nature, and I think what I loved so much to me about it and what sticks out to me so much about it is the idea that what makes something lovable is the amount of time we put into it. Like, if you put all of your time and heart and effort into something, then it is lovable. I thought that was a really unique concept because that's kind of what the Little Prince learns about his beloved flower on his planet, is that it's the time that he spent with it that made it so special to him, even when it had all of its faults. It's a kind of slow down and smell the roses type of book that highlights the brilliance of children and the silliness of adults. And overall, I think teaches us just the importance of loving what we have and being happy where we are. It's also a very sad book. The ending is quite devastating, however you interpret it. And the only reason I took 1 star off is because this book frustrated me. I won't tell you the ending because it's major spoilers, but in my mind, it did not turn out how it was supposed to. The Little Prince did not end up where I think he truly belonged. So, The Little Prince, 4 stars, loved it. And the last book that I read for my OWLs was for the Transfiguration prompt. This was read a book that involved shapeshifting, and for it I chose Hollow City by Ransom Riggs. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. This story is the sequel to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and it follows Jacob and the Peculiars as they go off to London and help Miss Peregrine, who has been transfigured into a bird, become herself again. This story is basically your typical quest story with people going off on a journey and running into lots of disaster along the way to meet their destination, and really it's just one bad thing happening to the Peculiars after the other. That alone probably would have only made it a 3-star read, but it has other elements that ended up making it really enjoyable for me. One of those being how atmospherical these stories are. I always feel transported. I think it's just Ransom Riggs' writing style. He makes settings and even the most mundane occurrences seem kind of brilliant and magical. I liked the very light fantasy elements of all of it. And the ending, oh my gosh, it was one huge giant twist that I didn't see coming at all. and it only happened in the span of a few pages, which once again has been like the trend for these books I read this month. But I love this story because I like seeing more about the Peculiars and the more nuanced parts of their relationships. We didn't get enough of that in the first book, but we definitely do in the second. And the only reason I took off 1 star is because I started to get really uncomfortable with Emma and Jacob's relationship. I don't know, if you've read these books, you'll have to let me know if you felt the same way. But I just started to get this feeling that like Emma is so much older than Jacob, and is this right? I don't know. Sometimes it just made me feel a little eh. But then at the same time, I kind of like them together, so I don't know. And then also sometimes I feel like the story is unnecessarily built around the pictures. Like sometimes I think maybe Ransom Riggs just picks pictures he really likes and bends the narrative to fit them instead of finding pictures that fit the narrative like the other way around. But still, exceptional sequel, 4-star read, much love to Hollow City. And there you have it. Those are the books that I read for the Owls Magical Readathon. I had a really great reading time, like nothing lower than 3 stars, and overall I thought it was a lot of fun. If you liked this video, be sure that you hit the like button. In the comments below, let me know how the Owls went for you if you participated, or if you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure that you hit the subscribe button because I post new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Occasionally there have been some Monday videos recently, but that's going to stop soon. I gotta slow down. And yeah, that's going to be it for now. So thanks for stopping by. Bye.